What?
Did Final Fantasy 16 leave the old fans behind?
Totally deserved. Fuck them. With your dog shit tournament combat. Fuck that.
I want to do something a little bit different because I noticed that in the run-up to and release of Final Fantasy 16, there was
I
a
wanna see
small
this.
but growing group of people online who began to say that they had problems with this newest release in the famous RPG franchise. This time produced by Creative Business Unit 3, the team
I cannot get over the fact that Creative Business Unit 3. Couldn't y'all come up with a better fucking name than that? That's like the least creative thing that you can think of.
the team behind the extremely popular
Ayo.
Final Fantasy 14 MMORPG.
Holy shit, they made that? I can see it. I can totally see it. Because the first early game, the castle, the characters, everything looked like it's from Final Fantasy
And at the
14.
time, I
First
felt
two,
like I
yeah.
understood. 16 is a
The
different
graphics kind of looks like
direction for
that.
Final
True.
Fantasy, and one that some people will either like or not like,
Yeah,
and
of
that's
course.
totally fine. But over the months leading to release, and with the drop of the demo, and now at launch, that not for me has kind of morphed into a not my Final Fantasy. A
Oh,
sort of
God.
catch-all phrase that
Haha, you won't be missed. Get the fuck out of here.
I
This
think
combat is
harkens
amazing.
back to what is really a non-existent era where we all knew what Final Fantasy was, and 16? Well, it ain't it. Which is nonsense. There's
I feel like Final
Yeah,
Fantasy
which is
has
nonsense.
always been an innovator. It always has been. Like, this isn't anything new. And I think the reason why Final Fantasy, like 15, people didn't really give a shit about it as much is because it didn't really feel like it was an innovator. At least,
I think in Final Fantasy 15, the problem with that game was it wasn't finished. You gotta see, go back and see the Final Fantasy 15's older videos. The game was half finished, like they released a bitch like Cyberpunk, dude.
didn't seem like that.
No wonder people are pissed off over that one. Even though you play as Sasuke, the story was kind of meh. No, none of the characters were rememberable, except for Cindy. You know,
To me, I watched it. I didn't play it.
never been a this
I
is
played that disaster. Yes, I do.
what Final Fantasy is. Every single
stream.
Final Fantasy game has pushed the boundaries of what the franchise was before.
Yeah.
And every single one is different.
I think this game, say what you want, I think Final Fantasy 16 pushed the boundary for the mainstream people to enjoy your game. Straight up. Like, if you play God of War, if you play Horizon the Forbidden dog shit, if you played any of those brain dead combat with this good story games, I think Final Fantasy 16 is a good game for you. Like, I would see normal people will enjoy this game.
Even if those differences are only in storytelling or world building. So when, for example, I watched SkillUp's review of the game, which, by the
Yeah.
way, a good review, dude makes great content.
Oh my god, people were so mad at SkillUp for making this fucking review. Because he didn't
Why?
say the game was that great. He didn't like it that much.
Oh,
I
really?
appreciate his review. I think that it's good to have people that have different opinions because I don't think that anything that he said in the
I assume he only played the early game.
review
That's what I think.
was like super fucking like wrong. I just didn't value it at the same scale that he did, which is fine. That's totally okay.
Yeah.
But I think he made a number of good points, and it was fine. He explained.
Yeah,
it well.
absolutely. The game is not perfect. None of the games are perfect, dude. Elden Ring has its flaws. Like, come on. This game also has flaws. If you didn't like that for that kind of flaws, completely understandable. No problem. You know?
Like, which is fair. Yes, I don't
Yeah.
think he invented this review to create criticism or controversy.
It bugged the hell out of me that the video opened with, in Square Enix's haste to evolve this franchise into something new, they've left behind far too much that made Final Fantasy Final Fantasy. In trying to reach a new
What do you mean by Final Fantasy? Every franchise has a different story and different mechanic. What do you mean?
audience, they've left behind
They always been like this game. Plays nothing like Final Fantasy 7. Go play Final Fantasy 7 remake, and then play this. This game, both of them plays completely different. Go play freaking Strangers of Paradise. That game plays like a Nico for some reason. You
and
know?
the audience that got the franchise to
Come
this
on.
point. And while most reviews and most players are extremely happy with the game, that's
Yeah.
the thing I noticed in most of the negative talk about it, that there's this undercurrent of they've chosen to leave what made Final Fantasy. They're leaving old fans behind for the new. And look, getting new fans was one
I think that's
Yeah, like what? Like the brain dead turn-based combat, like it's just a slugfest that should be existing in this time period in 2024 only on more phone games. Is that what you mean?
a smart thing to do. Like Breath of the
Yes.
Wild left old fans behind. Ocarina of Time left old fans behind.
Yeah.
How? What the fuck are you talking about, how? It was a massive departure from what the games were before. Halo, yeah, like, I mean, I don't know about Halo. Like, Halo,
Like what games I remember left behind and then it was better? Let me think. Warhammer maybe? Because it was a tabletop game before, but they went with the action combat. Maybe? I'm not sure.
what was it? I mean, like, Halo was, like, different from Marathon.
Like Super Mario? Super Mario went from 2D side-scrolling platformer into 3D. You know?
But, like,
And then
I'm trying to
Mario
think about
Kart,
besides
Mario
that,
whatever
I'm
the
not
fuck.
sure. Breath of the
Mario
Wild barely
Smash.
barely a Zelda game. Yeah, I feel like whenever Halo left old fans behind, that's not really a good example because I feel like they
Yeah.
did. It's not good. But I think that it's important to innovate on the game.
I
And
think
that with
Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3, people were complaining about it's not the same as the old ones.
Final Fantasy 17, whenever it comes
Dragon
out,
Age, I am
they
not
will
sure about
probably
that.
have. Final Fantasy 17, whenever it comes, important to innovate on the game. And I think
Yeah.
that with Final Fantasy 17, whenever it comes out, they will probably have. I think that based off of the feedback that they're receiving, and based
Mhm.
off of how well I'm assuming Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to be received, I think we're going to
That was a
probably
good
see
one.
something of more of a party system in Final Fantasy 17, because I do think the developers are listening to this feedback, and that I don't think that all feedback is accurate of like,
Oh, that does make sense. Final Fantasy has a party system. 17, it doesn't have jack shit. I see. 16 doesn't have jack shit. Yeah, but I didn't even bother realize that. That is actually a good point. You know, in Final Fantasy 7, you can control Tifa, you can control Garrett, you can control Clive, and you can control all three of them back to back, right? In this one, you were kind of stuck with the main character, Clive. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes. The RPG, yeah, I think I should have installed that, but it's not a big deal. The RPG elements in 16 is way lower. Like it's not nowhere. There is no party system. You don't party in 16.
oh yeah, this is what's wrong with the game. This is what needs to be fixed. Probably not. But like whenever people feel a certain way, the way that they feel.
I think for me personally, I would rather have a party that is autonomous than to command. Yeah, I think it was annoying. Like I don't want to manage the party. It was kind of boring for me, at least. I like to have them as a. I think it's kind of a mixed feelings about this. I like to have them, but I don't want to control them. If you know what I mean. I wish there is an option to
isn't
automate
necessarily
fully,
wrong,
right?
but it's up to the developer to really decide how to solve that problem.
Yeah.
You see kind of what
Like,
I mean?
The good option would be probably you can equip them with a ring or something, and then they will just be full AI. I would prefer that.
100%
They actually did that in 16 as well, which is a good idea. Really good idea.
the goal of Creative Business Unit 3.
Yeah.
Yoshida, the producer of this N14, said as much. And I think due to the franchise's history and impact, many players have created their own idea of what Final Fantasy is to them, turning a
Yeah.
blind eye to what the series is as a whole. It reminds me of when I was asked to be on a special board for PAX with various other people in the gaming space, and the question they asked
For
us
me,
to
the first Final Fantasy I played was 14, I think. No, I played the older ones. I think not the older. Like the 7, I think I played. I played 14. It was mind-numbingly boring. The
To
early
help
game
them
in
solve
14 was boring.
how can we grow packs? Because at the moment, our core audience and attendees
Yeah.
are getting older, having kids,
Yeah,
have
they're
less
getting old and fat, and their hair is turning gray, and they're not coming to gaming conventions anymore, and we don't like this. Yep,
Mm.
there it is. Blizzard's been having this same problem for a while, too.
time to come to the show. So how do we grow? And so myself and all the others in the room sat around
Yeah.
thinking up all sorts of ways they could do this, offering advice. But the
There
pushback
he
we
is.
kept getting was, if we take your advice, we could risk alienating those who already attend.
Yeah,
And so the
of course.
conversation would devolve into, what is the point of having us here if you're afraid to take the big risks? The only way you grow is by
And
doing
that's actually a really good point, is Jesse Cox used to be a WoW player. Like, he was really, really, really into WoW. Actually, like, I mean, I have a personal story about Jesse. This is, like, the first time I ever went to BlizzCon. I'm pretty sure Jesse Cox didn't even know who the fuck I was. And he just gave me his +1 for the Wowhead party. But he was like, oh, you trying to get in? Yeah, sure, you can come with me. It's fine. Yeah. So, yeah, he's a nice guy. I like him. It's good.
doing this on this very channel, one which
JJ.
I have had probably far too long. I spent 10 years doing Let's Plays, and then
Yeah.
the ecosystem
Nice.
changed, and Twitch is where you went to go watch Let's Plays, and YouTube Let's Plays kind of died off unless you had some sort of gimmick or some sort of fun
Yeah, they're not that much of a thing anymore.
goof thing that you were doing. For
Yeah.
the most part, most people didn't want to watch complete Let's Plays on YouTube, especially from someone who, in gaming space or influencer or content creator terms, is
Damn,
an old
13 years
man.
ago.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
those are the dark
that's,
ages.
that's the thing, is like, as a guy, right? I mean, this is a fucking fact. Is like, whenever I remember one time, so this is like, all right, I was like 16 at the time, and I remember we were hanging out at McDonald's, and we were supposed to be at school. We weren't at school. We were at McDonald's, and some guy came over who was 20 years old, and it felt really weird to me that he was hanging out with us, because like,
Yeah.
the
That
difference
would be weird.
between 16 and 20 is so big. Like, you know what I mean? It felt really weird. Like, am I, like, and that's probably the way y'all
Yeah, you
felt
were a
too,
kid
right?
that's
Like,
spending time
overall,
with the
yeah,
uncle.
is it?
Yup.
Yeah, it is.
There it is.
It definitely is. It's really big. Like,
Oh, yeah.
And at 16, you've got, you know, you not only you've got a whole year, and the guy wasn't weird or anything. We just both happened to be at McDonald's and we were hanging out, right? It's not.
Yeah, it
he
would be
wasn't a creep
uncomfortable.
or a weirdo or anything. I'm just saying, like, this is just like a fucking random encounter that happened.
Right away,
And,
yeah.
It super senior. Well, we had people that were 20 in my high school too. That's a good point, but that's different. Anyway, so like, you know, if you're 20, you've been out of school for 2 fucking years, man. Like, you've probably either had a job, you've moved out of your parents'
You are
house,
done. You are
you've
not
been in
with us
college,
anymore.
You've been at college for over a year.
Yeah.
Like, bro, 18 to 20 is like a
And I
big
happened with my
fucking deal,
biggest
man.
sister, with my
So, like,
relatives.
yeah,
We never
16
get
to
a
20
freaking along.
is huge.
The
So it's
age
like,
gap is
whenever
too
you're
much.
an older guy, you're not going to attract the same type of young audience.
Yep.
Like, you're not going to have Minecrafters that are super popular with the kids that are like 41. It just doesn't happen. And maybe, I mean, I'm sure it happens once or twice, right? But it's like definitely a super minority, and it's very uncommon. And it's just because people
Yep.
relate to, some of these streamers are kind of old though. I know, exactly. But like, what I'm saying is that, like, whenever you're young, and it becomes even more of a,
It
you know,
really
it's like half
depends
your age.
how up to date you are, you know, and what are the things you are talking about. It always
Plus
depends.
7 or whatever the fuck that thing is.
I mean, this
Like,
guy
I think
hasn't
that's also
gotten
like a
outdated
life
yet.
experience type
You
thing
know?
too, where like, if you're
Dude's
that far
34.
away from somebody in age, it's harder for you to relate to them.
So I stopped for the most part and instead did more news-related things and
Yeah.
videos like this. And yeah, sure, I took a hit at the start. People who had been here for a while were like, this isn't the Jesse I know, not my
Oh, yeah.
Jesse. But the channel recovered, it's growing again, and I've never been happier. And that is
And it took Jesse a while to do that, right? It's not like that shit happened overnight.
yeah.
It took him years.
what's happening to
Mm.
Final Fantasy. In order to keep the franchise around another 30 years, they have to grow and change and become something that more reflects what today's gamers want.
Absolutely.
And going back to SkillUp's review, just look at the comments. People in the comments are saying, never played a Final Fantasy,
Yeah.
but I'm going to try this one out. And that is a huge
Yeah, it
victory
looks
for
cool.
Yoshida
Like
and Square
Unbreakable.
Enix and everyone involved,
Dude,
no
that
matter
W.
what the lineage of Final Fantasy is.
Yep.
And we should talk that lineage because Final Fantasy is a series that has always been
Oh, God, what the
about
fuck is
taking
this?
risks. The name Final Fantasy comes
Yeah, it
partially
was.
from the fact that it was Sakaguchi
Look at Final Fantasy 11, for example. Like that was like, wasn't that basically one of the first online MMORPGs on a console? It's like insane. What the fuck?
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ,
I
how
feel like
old is
people
that
don't
thing?
really, people don't pay enough respect to how many different risks they've taken over the years.
Gucci's last
Revolutionary,
attempt, his final risk at creating something before giving up on game dev altogether.
There it
But the
is.
game was a hit, and each iteration since has taken the same risks. The rest is history,
Yeah.
a history worth talking about because I'm still
So that's why
asking the
it's called the
question,
Final Fantasy.
when was Final Fantasy Final
Jesus.
I
Fantasy?
never realized he broke the staff in that cinematic.
And more importantly, how do you even define what that means? Clearly, we're gonna include music. The music has always
Yeah.
been amazing in Final Fantasy. The visuals, even back in the sprite in
Oh,
Mode
yeah,
7
it's-
days,
it's
were
really
stunning.
good.
Then maybe when you say it's not Final Fantasy, you mean the combat system. How it's not turn-based, or it looks different. You miss the active...
Why the fuck?
combat
Why the
system.
fuck you want a turn-based combat when you can do this?
How it's not turn-based, or it looks different. You miss the active time battles, which really
Why would you do
haven't
that?
been a thing since 2001.
Yo, that's a good combo. Did you guys see that?
Fantasy. You mean the combat system.
He just knocked the bitch into the sky with the this is Garuda, right? Garuda? I think yeah, this is Garuda, the wind element, and
How
then
it's not
slammed the bitch into the floor with the Titan.
turn-based, or it looks different. You
What a good
miss
combo
the
that
active
was.
time battles, which really haven't been a thing since 2001 in Final Fantasy X. But
I
It's
never
just
did
like-
that.
I just feel
That's why
like
I noticed it.
turn-based games don't have
That's
the
actually a smart
same-
move.
They-
The combo I thought was using the ice attack and then the fire and then the tornado Garuda with the fire.
They
That's
don't
pretty
have
much
the
it.
same clout that they used to have. I mean, for lack of a better word, like turn-based games used to be massive, and like now they're still around. It's not like there's no turn-based games. I mean, they didn't die like
JRPG,
RTS
yeah.
died, but they're not as popular as they were in 2001.
Final Fantasy 11 and 14 are
That's
MMORPGs and have MMORPG style combat. 12
they're not dead. Please, they're not dead. There's Octopath Traveler, Star Rail, fucking Darkest Dungeon, Persona, Divinity. I'm not saying that they're dead, but let's be real. They're not as big as they used to be.
did
They
away
are
with
not,
random
and they
encounters
never
and made
be. Like every game nowadays wants to be a Souls-like. So that is the future.
enemies visible on
You're
the map.
welcome.
The active time battle system became the active
If you have slower response time, slower gameplay response time in the game, sucks to be you.
dimension battle system and introduced gambits. 13 returned to a variant of the ATB system, although with much more button mashing. 15 introduced an action-based system called the Active Cross Battle, which instead of a menu, players mapped buttons on a controller. They're
Jesus, this is the 15th
all over the
combat.
place. And the active time battle system of old,
I mean,
buttons
at
on a
least he
controller,
parried. Look at that.
They're all over the place. And the active time
Yeah.
battle system of old
Yeah, that looks
wasn't really
miserable.
introduced until Final Fantasy 4 and 5, and then 5 had the job system, which was a whole other thing, and then that wasn't in Final Fantasy 6. So I guess then maybe when you're saying it's not your Final Fantasy, you're talking about the setting or the world building. But even there, the games have always about the setting.
Isn't this Secret of Mana? Didn't Secret of Mana have this exact same thing with the cannonballs? That's crazy. So Final Fantasy IV had the same thing. Holy shit, I didn't even know that. Secret of Mana takes place in the same world? What the fuck? I had no idea.
Or the world building. But even there, the games have
Oh,
always
really?
pushed the boundaries.
I didn't know that.
Final Fantasy 1 through
Yeah.
5 were fantasy
I love
stories
the
set
game
in
of that.
worlds of castles and crystals, and sure, there were airships and chocobos.
And I think also, like, if
You
I'm
got
sure we're
airships
probably gonna
and
talk about
chocobos in
but,
this
like,
game,
Final
too.
Fantasy
Not airships,
14, I feel like never I feel like Final Fantasy 14, I feel like that game really started to pop off whenever I started to really hear about it was Stormblood. Because Stormblood was whenever they kind of said, you know what? We're not just going to be a WoW clone anymore. We're going to be our own game. And I think
Smart.
after that, and then going in
Yeah, they just went full hard on story and then the cutscenes
the
and all the stuff.
Shadowbringers,
After
and then
that,
obviously Endwalker, but
but then
mainly Stormblood and Shadowbringers, whenever it gained its own identity. Because if you look at the original A Realm Reborn abilities, so many things from Final Fantasy
still thinking that
14
game is slow
were
as
just
fuck.
like lifted off of WoW because WoW did this, and so we're gonna do this too. And then somebody over there was like, wait a minute, why the fuck are we doing the same thing they're doing? This isn't good for the game.
Moogles, but
Let's do
all of
something
that
else.
took time to develop
Smart
too.
move.
More
There were no
innovation.
chocobos in Final Fantasy 1. The first
Really?
Moogle was in Final Fantasy 3. Final Fantasy 4 was the first time they really started to delve into deep character drama. Final Fantasy 6 was this push into the trope of magic versus technology.
Oh.
7 then took that
Oh.
concept and ran with it, as technology and its impact on the world played a major role in
my
that storytelling. Hell, you spent the first part of that game in a giant city, dystopian
This is Final Fantasy 7. I have never played Final Fantasy 7. The closest thing I've ever come to that is watching Esfand play the remake, and I watched Final Fantasy 7 Advent Children. That's it. I never played Final Fantasy 7. I want to play the remake.
cyberpunk setting, which was shocking at the time. 8 is about teens and floating schools battling other school kids and then witches.
What the hell?
9 is a return to fantasy as a tribute to the games that came before it. And then 10 brings us the world of Blitzball,
Dude,
Big
What the
really
fuck is this? Oh
Cannot
god.
Express, like Final Fantasy X. I don't know if there was ever a game that was, for its time, as much of a graphics update as Final Fantasy X. It was
Really?
fucking
Damn.
ridiculous for its time.
That does it looks like a PS3
disgusting.
era.
cities and a world that for the first time is kind of modeled off something different
Like
compared
this
to the other
shit
games.
was like look at these graphics, and like this was at the same time that other characters were just 17 different triangles. It was
Yeah.
fucking ridiculous.
Games,
Really?
this time being inspired by Southeast Asia. 11 is straight up an old school MMORPG with
Yeah.
fantasy tropes abound.
Well,
12
and no. I wish he had covered this more. Final Fantasy 11 was the biggest and the first that people still remember to this day. Console MMORPG.
Yeah, Momo.
Final
Ah.
Fantasy 11 is fucking insane. It's still going.
Yeah, I think the reason why is because they are in Japan, so it's way easier for them to put it on fucking Sony.
is a return to magic
Yeah.
versus technology in a vast desert-filled world, echoing more Star Wars than Final Fantasy. 13, 1,
Yeah.
2, and 3 are straight up anime as hell and set in a semi-futuristic world. And 15 is literally 4 dudes pushing a car to the song Stand By Me. And I saved 14 for last since it's ongoing, and honestly,
Yeah.
since Yoshida produces this game as well, it makes sense to save this for the end of the list. If you don't know the
Like,
history of
what
this
the
game,
hell
just
is
go watch
that?
the No
Is
Clip
that a
documentary.
rainbow?
That documentary was so good. I watched the whole thing.
It's amazing. But it also
Oh, I
clearly
gotta see that.
establishes that 14 is a love letter to every single one of these other games I mentioned.
Yep.
Yoshida and the team love Final Fantasy. There is absolutely no way they would set out to ruin that. The changes they've made to 16 aren't drastic or crazy attempts to lure a new audience. They're keeping with tradition. And yeah, you may still have the complaint that it's more Game of Thrones than Final Fantasy. And
And it does have a lot of Game of
That's a good idea. That's the thing. Game of
Thrones
Thrones is so
elements.
good. It fell off like a flat on its face at the end, but the Game of Thrones is
It
really good.
does. Absolutely. A lot of Game of Thrones elements.
that it's more Game of Thrones than
Oh,
Final
yeah.
Fantasy. And
And it does have a lot of Game of Thrones elements.
It's
It
good.
does. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
first, I feel like a lot of people are still upset about Game of Thrones. Look, it hurt me too. That ending sucked. But it's still like a
Yeah,
loaded
that
phrase.
ending
It's
sucked.
akin to calling something the Dark Souls of.
Oh,
There's this
God.
common phrase in Thrones. Look, it hurt me too.
Man, imagine the next. I think that would be so hilarious. Imagine the next Final Fantasy 17 is gonna be fucking Souls-like.
That
Oh
ending
god.
sucked. But it's still like a loaded phrase. It's akin to calling something the Dark Souls of.
Oh,
There's this
God.
connotation that they're not trying to do anything new. They're just trying to copy something else and lure people in. But I
Yeah.
still feel like that complaint is off the mark. Like, I don't understand what you mean by that.
A dog shit game. by
I
the
don't
way.
think you
Yeah,
mean
if a
Like
game has
Combat and
rolling
Star Wars Jedi
iframes,
Survivor
it's
shit.
Dark Souls. It's just that simple. Yeah. So if you
Nah.
can roll or you
Nah, if any boss that you fight against, two shots you is
can
Dark
iframe
Souls.
things, it's Dark Souls.
fantasy settings. There have been
No, and yeah, there is two things you can figure out as soon as you see it. If you have a stamina consumption when you dodge, it's a Dark Souls. It's a Souls-like, and if the boss two shots you, it's a Souls-like.
fantasy settings
Pretty
in
much.
Final Fantasy games forever. Is
Yeah.
that
You
it's
gotta, in that by logic, Genshin Impact is a Souls-like. You guys played Genshin Impact? That fucking thing is tough. Jesus
trying to be more
Christ.
adult, more mature, have
didn't
sexual
mind that.
situations, violence, swearing in that fantasy setting? I mean,
Yeah, there is lots
you
of fuck
probably
in the
didn't
game.
play or like Final Fantasy Tactics then, because
Both
that game
figure it
is
again, literally.
Game of Thrones is shit, and it's not even a mainline game.
Yeah.
Adult themes have been part of Final Fantasy
I can
for
see that.
decades. The only difference is culturally, we're in a place where the average video game player is 30-something, and the developer.
Damn. That
Really?
love?
Holy shit.
Jesus. What are the kids doing these
developers,
days?
and more importantly, the translators who are responsible for making a lot of the previous developers, and more importantly,
This guy looks like literally he's from a ripoff from He-Man. Look at this guy. Come on.
the translators who are responsible for making a lot of the previous Final Fantasy games more kid-friendly.
What?
They're like,
Ryan
oh,
played that
we
game
don't
again.
have to hide our adult story under the veneer of teen or kid-friendly anymore.
Yeah, like I mean Final Fantasy 16 that game is
Goes
raw.
hard. Yeah,
That
that
shit is
game goes
raw as
hard.
hell.
Yup.
Just some examples off the top of my head. Final Fantasy VI had genocide, suicide, slavery, and much worse, but that's spoilers. 7 literally had a scene where a man tries to rape one or more of the main characters. Hell, there's straight up a story beat about forcing two characters into interspecies sex. One of the main themes of 9 is a child coming to terms
What the fuck? When did that happen? That looks like Final Fantasy 7. Oh god, what the fuck?
with characters into interspecies sex.
What
One of the main themes
fuck?
of 9 is a child coming to terms with life, death, and
And there's even there's an implied
Yeah, that's the He-Man ripoff.
line of Final Fantasy 16. Like I'm not gonna
Yes,
give it
that
away
is.
or anything like that, but there is an implication.
what any of it's
Yeah.
Yeah,
for.
that is.
Hell, 10 is about the corruption of religion.
But
There
it's
are
not
so many
movable.
examples I couldn't possibly remember all of them or spell them out for you, but I'm sure people in the comments will. And that's what rubs me wrong about all of this.
Well,
None of
and
it's
look at like Final Fantasy 14. The reason why those stories are good is because it doesn't caricature the bad people as just universally horrible people that
Yeah.
that's all there is to it, right? Like they actually are, it's a genuine struggle of ideals and conflict.
Yeah, they have some kind of a what do you call it? Story and the motivation to do things what they're doing. You know, fucking Ultima had an interesting motivation behind it because he literally wants to save the world, and then Odin supports him because he wants to save the world too. You know?
They show you how they got that way. Yeah, exactly. Final Fantasy 14
Oh,
literally has
yeah.
a little politics to it. Yeah, they have like the old refugee thing. I think that's the first one that comes to mind. For sure.
new. Even the complaints. You don't even have to go far back to see examples of that. When Final Fantasy XII came out, fans thought it was a little too mature and serious compared to 10 and 10-2, which had some mature themes but were presented differently. When 7 came out, sure, it was praised by many people,
Yeah,
but at the
that
same
was-
time, reviewers
That was
would
one of the big reasons is that they had 2 girls in that game that had big boobs. So like at that time, a lot of the people who were 30 now were like 14 then, 13, you know, like so this was like a really, really good game.
say stuff like, the storytelling is lengthy, involved, and definitely too dialogue heavy for preteen attention spans. There's also swear words in adult situations.
Yeah.
But while most Japanese RPGs are happy to adopt an if it's not broke, don't fix it attitude in bringing their titles across from the 16-bit days, Final Fantasy VII has decided to divorce itself almost entirely from its predecessors and tip the whole genre on its head.
Yeah, it was not that
It's
dark
more
at
than
all.
okay
But 16 goes in
to
hard.
not like a game for any number of reasons. If you don't like 16,
Yep.
that's fine. But to say it's not Final Fantasy or leaving fans
wow.
behind is an insult to the legacy of what these games are. They're all unique. They're all different and willing to try.
Oh yeah, I think you have to take it to Final Fantasy as a brand at this point. Like how Assassin's Creed is now a brand. What's our Assassin's Creed Assassin about Valhalla? What's Assassin about Odyssey? You know? It's just a brand.
unique and different
You know?
things. That's what makes them special. So while you may not like the changes they made to this one, like how I didn't like 13, it's still
That looks like
exactly
Bayonetta.
what it has always been. Taking
Yeah, it
chances.
doesn't have to be, like, not every single one has to be exactly what you want. You know?
Yeah. Even Assassin's
pushing
Creed is kind of
boundaries
everything away
and
because
trying
it's
to
not
reach a new
to
audience.
play the same thing
That's
over
what
and
makes
over
it such
again.
a fun franchise. You can be a
Yeah.
fan of 8 or 12 or 4 or 6 or 16 or maybe just
Yeah.
7. But I promise you,
Holy shit.
for the vast majority of fans,
I
even
think
you
16 is
watching
best.
right now, you most likely became a fan because of a risk or change that might have upset another player.
That's actually a
yeah.
really, really good fucking point. That's actually, yeah.
Because
They
of this
got
risk
you
they took with this
Yeah.
Final Fantasy
There
16,
is no
I will
My
consider
Final
playing the next
Fantasy.
one.
There's just Final
It is so
Fantasy.
good. My Final Fantasy is
Good,
16. Straight up.
Bad, and everything in between.
Like if they add more party
That was
system and
really
other
good.
stuff,
Holy
sure.
shit. Wow.
But damn.
Really good video.
By far the
this
best
is a
Final
really,
Fantasy
really
in
good
my
video.
opinion.
And he's
16
right,
was
you know, in
insane.
terms of me, I became a big fan
Really
of,
good.
Of Final Fantasy because of Final Fantasy VII, which apparently took a lot of risks from back in the day. And
Oh,
I
really?
always liked the little sprites. You know, I especially liked the little black mage sprite with like the little hat and the dark face. You can't see him. Oh, those were so cool, man. Play Blue Protocol on VPN, please. I'll get banned. They'll ban me. Jesse's almost at 1 million subs. I'll give you guys a link. Maybe you guys can give him some subs, help him get there, man. Very good game. Yeah, I need to play it, man. I really do. Anyone shown Zach those stylish Final Fantasy 16 I feel like I've done some pretty good combos myself, okay? Like, I mean, come on. What the fuck? Well, anyway, yeah. I think that Final Fantasy next time around, especially... I think Dragon's Dogma 2 is actually going to be, if it's as good as Dragon's Dogma 1 is, and people like it as much, I think that if it comes out and it is as good as the first one and as good as people say it will be, I think that it will shift the genre. I think it will shift the entire thing. I'm going to be playing Dragon's Dogma 1. I'll be playing it
I gotta
probably
see
next
those.
month, realistically. That's my plan. I want to play it next month. Yeah, I do think that it will shift the entire genre. And I think that we'll see elements of what
Man,
people
this
kind
year
of
is like a
explain
fucking
Dragon's
milk,
Dogma has.
because
I think
Dragon's
we'll probably see
Dogma
that in
is
Final
dog
Fantasy
shit.
17
It was a
as
massive flop, unfortunately.
as a response to
I wanna see
people's
the
feedback.
DLCs.
But yeah, I think Final
Like,
Fantasy 16
what is the
great.
DLC on Final
I think
Fantasy
the
16?
critics
Is there any
of
story in
Final
it?
Fantasy 16
Because
are
I
just
think
like
I
the
only have the
guys
base
that
game.
they see a picture of an obviously really hot girl on Twitter and they comment, pointy elbows, pointy knees, 2 out of 10. Not for me. That's the kind of way that people that's the kind of people that are ranking Final Fantasy 16 as a 4. Is it a 10 though? Maybe not. I haven't finished the game. I think that
Yeah,
right now
9.5.
I would say the
Let's
game
go.
is a 9.5. It
See?
might go to a 10 depending on how it ends. But yeah, right now I'm saying it's a 9.5. Before you touch the game, you think it'll be you said it would be game of the year. Don't you think that's weird? Not really. I mean, I could have probably told you that Zelda was probably going to be one of the contenders for game of the year before it came out too. Because I know Nintendo and they make incredible games and they're making a game. We know Yoshida. We know the people that are working on Final Fantasy 16. We know it's going to be an incredible game. It's the same as whenever From Software. comes out. Like I said, Elden Ring was going to be game of the year before it came out too. How about
True.
that?
No shit. Final Fantasy is success or a flop. I think I will watch that tomorrow or something. Like if you've been watching what the fuck is this? Watched too much of this. So I will take a break and then relax and then make the videos on my YouTube. But I think this game is really good. I think they are going in a good direction. If they make it like 10 more games like it with the same combat, I will still play it. It was really good.
The wave was raised by Leviathan in an act.
Only that if I wish to know more, we must meet in person. And that the Veil can arrange a meeting. So in harmless. The end of its existence, but all's well that ends well, I suppose.
What was it anyway?
A manifestation of Leviathan's power. When we visited Wallius in the Surge, he was angry and
I see. So it's like before the conclusion. Okay, fair enough. Not a big deal. I don't think I'm missing that much when I'm playing with the DLC. Alright. Thank you for dropping by. Thank you for watching my stream. I'm gonna take it easy and then relax and sleep. You guys have a great day, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye bye. It's also signing out. Take care.